sensitivity to them because of the G pushiness. It's something on my part. It's very deep with me. I think I've done a lot to clear this out of myself, but it's something I have to keep watching for and keep looking for because earlier issues that one has, those are ones you'll have to work harder as you go out forward with your enlightenment discovery adventure, and you have to then go back to what you knew from the beginning. You go deeper back to the deeper roots of you as you get better and better data you learn from the world. It may confirm what you knew, that's great, or it may question that. So for me, for example, my family, I believe that myself, my dad, but also my mom and two sisters are all likely Nai. And so for that reason, there is a pushiness I'm sensitive to. And to a large degree, if it's done healthy with my fifth gear, that awareness, that heightened awareness from those life experiences does help me to spot G-Mojos, G-Mojo females. But I believe it could be so triggered, it can be so triggered that when there's like the absence of it, where I'm not feeling a pushiness, I'm feeling more like a moody, sensitive, sulky, shy, bookish, those kinds of signals, I just sort of like, oh, the lack of that pushy thing that G-Mojos, not G-Mojos, G-users, all G-users have there's a little bit of a mode of pushiness. And so when I'm not feeling that, sometimes that negative can be taken as a positive for Jai. The negative of an expected G element is taken as a false positive for Jai. It doesn't necessarily mean that. So there's another error. What else? Attraction. This is related to some of the other things I said, but it's its own thing, which is, in general, those who know me, I'm quite the fan of Jai. So when I feel a level of attraction, I say physical attraction, but just sort of emotional, psychological attraction, just sort of like, ooh, that person's neat. I could see talking with them. They'd be cool to hang out with. Not that, for example, like a Jinai or an Izai or Jivai, obviously they can't have that, but I tend to have my math imagining a bit more of a pushiness, as mentioned before, and as a part of that, when I sense that pushiness, because I've had a lot of experience in my life with G-Mojo ladies, and so I'm aware that we can be very good friends, and I've gone on lots of adventures with G-Mojo ladies, but I have not gotten into that as a romantic avenue. So again, when I may feel that kind of energy, again, not say physical or sexual, but just sort of like a connection, a special, perhaps intimate connection, intimacy of mind, intimacy of heart. Like I could see getting close to that person in some way. That feeling does not automatically mean Jai. So that's something I have to reconcile with, that I have a lot of experiences with Ji, but because of that, I had to sort of raise up my Jai spirits in order to give me a more complete picture. And so there is, in a way, I've had more experience with Jai in my mind than in the world. Although it gets a little gray when you talk about how many movies I've seen and TV shows I've watched, because that's not in the real world, but it's not technically in here either. But anyway, that element, whereas I have more experience in my life with Ji in the world. I've known lots of G-Mojo ladies. So when I go into my head, and also a lot of the media I would do, I would actually favor Ni Jai, Jai Ni, and if I went other places, sometimes I'd go Nai Z, I'd go V Jai, I'd go Jai V, and that's been a pattern for me. And that's all fine. First of all, that's fine. That's well within my rights as a healthy Nai Ji, I can do that. But it also is knowledge, it's wisdom. So it's not wrong that I actually have that kind of particular arrangement, and I'm aware I have that arrangement, and I can use that to make detections. But I have to note that there can be some imbalances, and I have to work to get past that. Because this, I've experienced this before, for example, with the Nijai female and the Jinai female, where they would be in shows I like this one, I don't know what she is, but it's a Dark Matter, I think. I like that show a lot, and the main female character, like the captain of the ship, I think she's really cool. And like, I imagine, ooh, that'd be cool to fly around the ship with her and maybe be romantic, yeah, but more just be like in a story with this person. They're neat. I think I could do adventures with them and we could get some really cool XP together. We could do some really cool leveling up together. Which doesn't mean that still wouldn't be a possibility, but because of that feeling, I thought Nijai. Saw Abram and went Nijai, but I think there's a likely chance that actress is a Jinai. So I'm aware of this, but I did not know it had actually gone over here into the Jevez area. But apparently that imbalance in myself, it is there, and so I'll get it out as best I can, and I will look for it in all the other alchemies. Which brings up another thing that Nex is saying to me. It is finite. There are only so many qualias because the mathematical structure of it. So I just got, because each time I figure out the next ring, it kind of adjusts how I look at future rings and how I look back in purifications on bubbles rings I've done prior. So, yeah. I guess I'm going there, but there's that. Oh, basically that it is finite because of the Z, the math structure of it, and Vi, the volume. So 1,000, I'm starting to get to where that's not so big, although flipping it this fast with the sample surfer, whoo, this is intense at first, but I'm going to get a lot of good purification, and then the ones after that will require less purification, and I'll be more conditioned to flipping this size data this fast, which the program allows for. Let's see. Oh, kind of on that, I guess something I would kind of share is kind of like a memory drop. Is this process, maybe it'll help the community, is these waves, they happen continuously, but then there's some major like benchmark waves. The ones that there's all these waves that happen with the spiritual, philosophical, naturalistic observation that is where Podlar came from. But at some point that led to me getting into human qualia. I always knew humans had qualia, and that was how the different animals and gemstone ninjas and other things I got going on in here, that does imply that. But for me, I was more focused on the philosophical motifs, like treating everyone as an equal and things like that. Like purple crystal is just as cool as blue fur. We can all get along. Those kind of lessons I was really focusing on. Not the fact that purple meant something particular and specific, and the blue did. I knew because they did things with like heraldry, but that wasn't the focus. The focus was on, if you think like a game, you have programming under it and story on top of it. I've been about story, so I came from comics, from mythology, from legends, from religious traditions, things of that nature, urban legends, anything about what people do in different places, the most interesting, influential people and what they did and how it influenced other humans, I like to get into. Anyway, here's the waves of this thing, this phenomenon particularly, the kind of the programming under the hood. Well, the first wave, there's like 5 of them. The first one was when I started to realize that this actually overlapped onto like things that people in personality type and typology, other like qualia-based models were doing. But that's not where I came from. I came from this teaching story, a more philosophical bent, shamanic. And that led to like me overlapping into Chinese face reading and a bunch of other stuff that it's like, okay, but that I wasn't trying to do face reading. I wasn't trying to do quality of categorization. Actually, what I was doing, those who've been doing it with me, the CNC, has been my focus. What are these things we believe in? What are all the things that some significant portion of humans, even if it's just one exceptional person, but what is it that they are and why? And which one's better? And why do they conflict? And do they really conflict? That's what I was focused on. I'm still focused on that. So, but then I realized, oh, and so I began, this may seem removed, but I believe it's the first wave. I began specifically trying to figure out the color-coded synonymy they were giving me. The different animal and nature element metaphors that are woven into all the stories and all the cool things that the characters can do. I was like, oh, because I always knew that they would pick certain people from movies and they would populate my Martian Manifesto story with very specific actors and actresses or performers or whatever, people in pop culture, presidents, whatever, for certain roles. And when they would do that, they would give them various metaphoric embodiment. So I knew that, but that was the first time going, oh, what does this mean? And that's also when I became aware that typology was flawed, at least from my point of view. I didn't have the evidence yet to prove that, but I already knew, for me, I wasn't going to agree with it because my spirits were giving me story metaphor answers to what my dad is. My dad took a eval and he thought he's a Vaiji because he's a very on point Naiji. And my spirits are like, no. In the story, the metaphoric embodiment they gave him and other people, you know, like, no, that's not what you are. Yeah, I remember certain people thought like Jodie Foster was an INFJ. Nope, she's a very, very smart, very, very reclusive, very hardworking, very serious, awesome Nijai. So my spirits kind of let me know there is something going on here, but they don't have it. You'll have to use this to get the answers. And so I began kind of trying to figure out why the cast of characters I have are cast in the roles that they gave them with the metaphoric embodiment that they have. So the next one was, and so when I started doing that, I was freaking out. Those first videos I ever did, was super raw. I was in a state. That was the beginning of that process. And I was like, what am I gonna do with this information? Am I insane? How am I gonna go forward with this? Fuck me. You know what I mean? That's how I was feeling. I didn't say that a lot. I was actually in a character, but I had to do that to like get rid of the energy. So this is a continuation. Today's vlogging is a continuation of that tradition. And Nexie got me to do that too. She got me going camera. I was like, I'm not going on camera like as me. Although I did come out, I kind of mixed, like made up like funny, fucked up story, but then I would actually slip and talk about me. And then as the filmings went on, I realized, oh, I actually just want to talk about me, but I didn't want to do that at first. So anyway, I began, once I realized, okay, this is a thing, and that was the very beginning of the evidence, and I was like, the evidence was my synonymy was just seeing it so hard. They were seeing they'd been showing me, stories. I had taken that and made sections of the story, little games that I would make sure I try to get a high score on, and now I was seeing this programming. And the more I looked, the more I started to see the edges of it and how they lined up with things. And then when I'd go away, two things would happen. One, my understanding would percolate, and when I'd go back to it, I could see better and clearer. And then when I would try and stay away, because I'm like, maybe I'm insane. Maybe I'm insane. So let me see if I can just ignore this. They're like, you need to look at this. And then I'd see somebody at a grocery store, I would see someone in a movie, and it got to where I couldn't watch movies, I couldn't watch TV, couldn't do anything because it would just keep reminding me, not unless I worked the case. Because it was now, the case was everywhere. I'd made the connection between my teaching story, and what's going on with human qualia, and boom. But the early days were gnarly. But then as that wave got better, I started feeling more and more confident. How confident? For me, this was huge. I actually spoke to somebody, Jailene. And so she and I began a conversation. And in talking with her, she asked a lot of questions. about, what about, this person? What about my mom? What about that person you teach martial arts? What about this and that? What about these things? And so beginning to constellate the people that she knew, both in our lives together and in pop culture, that was a second big wave. That was my mind. It was new to my mind, not the teaching story in general, but my teaching story actually making a connection to this actual, very worldly programming. That was a new thing at first, but it gave me a lot of gains. But the beginning waves almost drowned me. Same thing with Jailene. It was intense talking to the person about it, and this was the first one basically saying, this is what's going on. For example, telling her that she had Jai, she wouldn't believe me. Until I kept saying her face was doing something, and she kept saying it wasn't doing that, and then we got video, and she was doing it. And then there's other things besides that, but that was the beginning of me actually having another person say, oh, I think it's this, and then my spirits, besides just wanting to figure out in general, going, yes or no on that. And that get me more in touch with my strength, though, my strength of my genius and the discipline of mojo reading, qualia reading, because I needed to find something to prove to myself first why I believed my answer. And then if I believed it, I needed to be able to, if I didn't believe it, then I should keep thinking. I would just say I don't know what the answer is right now. But if I did believe it and I need to explain to Jailene, I had to be able to find cues. That was the beginning of pointing cues out. I think probably, well, my spirits were doing, because they were already casting the characters, so they were already doing that 3 zones the face thing. But I became actively aware of that, I believe, with Jailene, when I started trying to point out specifically. It could be something else, but I believe the Jai crinkle. The Jai crinkle may be the first cue I pointed out to another human. A little history there for you. History of Pod Lair. Yeah, because I was trying to explain to her what she was and this and that, and then she's like, I don't know exact words, but I guess she wouldn't know, how'd I know that? I would point to the crinkle and the fact that it happened so quick and fast and that it went up her whole face, and she said, no, I don't. And then I said, well, that's because the kind of cue it is, it seems like it's happening when you are resonating something, so you wouldn't know you're doing it, you would just be feeling it. I didn't really equate this to any typology thing early on. Well, I guess I did vaguely, but it was mainly trying to actually figure out, I guess, were they onto something? I was trying to figure out if what I'm looking at is the same thing they're trying to look at. Yeah, that was the beginning step there. And again, the first waves, woo, really, really intense. But then it got stronger. Strong enough that I was willing to talk to the public a little bit. And that's where I met Ademus. With Ademus, that's when I formally was like, okay, I believe that what I'm doing is going to overlap what, at least this aspect of it is going to overlap what typology is doing. Not the majority of Pod Lair. Majority of Pod Lair is just its philosophical principles, but this is a bedrock that those principles are, a data bedrock those principles are based on. So I realized, oh, I need to find out what is there. I just assumed, I didn't realize how weak they were going to be. I just assumed everyone was going to have then their data collection to show to the world, here's what we think. And as I looked into it, there weren't much of lists. We've talked a lot about that. The lists aren't very big, and their media for them is horrible, and what they do have is generally not read correctly, at least not according to our methodology. So that was the first, because before the Jailene, we were just trying to figure out who was in our lives. And a lot of people in our lives, Naiji, Jainine, Ijai, different things like that. So we didn't actually have to do all of the mojos. But then with Ademus, I was like, oh, we need to have a set. And that began me trying to get like 10 of each. That was my first attempt to make sets. When I started trying to make a set, again, that was a completely different mental process than just naturally looking at what's around. By making a set, I'm not just trying to look around at the animals and their fossils. I'm trying to figure out what is the unifying, explaining premise. So how do I make a set to go, okay, these are the animal trees, and these are doing this, and these are doing this, and here's why. So that's getting very Z for me. Next, the fourth wave is when I realized actually in order to get these, the kind of the small list of like really super famous people that people want to know, or certain mojos they want to know, actually going at it one at a time was going to be inefficient. I was going to need to do mass reading. And I started contemplating, can I do 1,000? After I got 1,000, like, can I do 10,000? After I did 10,000, like, can I do 32,000? And I got close to that, I'm like, oh, where is this, you know what I mean? So that whole process, I think, has been like wave 4. And the beginning of it, running out of time here, but the beginning of it is when it was really gnarly and almost drowned me. But then afterwards, I felt stronger and stronger and stronger as our data has gotten bigger and cleaner. And so now, with the sample server program, I believe we're starting a new, benchmark wave where we are going to be able to flip the data much faster, do cross sections, really do things with it that will help with the phenomena that weren't possible prior. Well, they could have been possible, but it would have been much slower. And so the mind imitates what it sees. It does its own thing, but also there's really good mechanisms in the world. Is it plays with that game in the world. When it's on its own time, it will adopt that and it'll go at that speed. It now knows, oh, we can go at that speed, we can do it like that. So kind of like going to a good gym. You can get a certain piece of equipment to train you to go, oh, your body's like, we can do that. And then you're like a whole new character. So I guess that's basically all for right now. Other to say that listening to all these people talk on the debates, something else has come up over and over again about sides that to be a seeker you must introduce doubt, and any person who actually will not put doubt into their argument is actually not a real seeker. There's a saying that goes something like you should periodically take things that you held to be absolutely true and hang a question mark on that. So that's what I'm doing. Some of these samples go way back, and so they were used sort of like holding positions to do other work. But sometimes it happens that a holding position allows you to go out and do better work and get XP and level up, so when you come back and look at it, you're like, oh, wait a minute, actually that case goes over here. Learning every day, and I feel better having talked, and thank you for listening to me. And Nexie says I did good. She's giving me the clap. That sounded bad. Well, she's the only lover I want, so it don't matter. All right, baby. And world, see ya.